Elena Rodriguez stepped off the transport truck at Fort Blackstone with her weathered duffel bag and a rifle case that bore the scars of countless missions. The Montana mountain air sliced through her jacket as she surveyed the fortress of concrete and steel carved into the granite cliffs. This was it, the Elite Marksman Academy, the military's most prestigious sharpshooting program. Little did she know she was walking into a system designed to break people exactly like her. The other recruits moved with practiced arrogance, their pristine tactical gear gleaming under the harsh morning sun. Elena watched them compare their cutting-edge rifles, each weapon worth more than most people's annual salary. Her own rifle, a battle-tested bolt-action her father had carried through 3 tours of duty, suddenly felt like a relic in her canvas case. "Who brings an antique to the future of warfare?" muttered Brett Kingston, a cocky recruit from Alabama, whose voice carried the authority of inherited privilege. His comment drew snickers from his circle of followers. "Hey, museum lady, you sure you didn't take a wrong turn from the history exhibit?" Elena remained silent, her jaw set in the way that had intimidated drill sergeants for over a decade. She pulled out her leather journal, its pages thick with hand-drawn wind charts and ballistic calculations that represented years of obsessive study. While others boasted about their equipment specifications, she quietly observed the range flags dancing in patterns that told stories only she could read. Major Thompson, the head instructor, barely acknowledged her during roll call. When he reached her name, he paused as if the paperwork had made an error. "Rodriguez, administrative transfer?" he asked, consulting his tablet with obvious confusion. "No, sir, marksman candidate," Elena replied, her voice carrying 15 years of military authority. Thompson's eyes swept over her, taking in her worn fatigues, scuffed boots, and the obvious age gap between her gear and everyone else's gleaming equipment. "Right," he said, his tone suggesting she was a clerical mistake that would sort itself out soon enough. What Thompson didn't know was that Elena had scored perfect marks on every marksmanship test she'd ever taken. What he couldn't see was the secret she carried, a gift for reading conditions that bordered on supernatural. The first day's briefing painted a clear picture. Velocity ruled at Fort Blackstone, fast target acquisition, rapid engagement, lightning-quick eliminations. The Academy's motto blazed across the main building in chrome letters, "Speed kills first." Everything Elena had learned about patience and precision seemed suddenly obsolete. During equipment inspection, Sergeant Martinez, the range supervisor, lifted Elena's rifle like it might crumble to dust. "Does this relic even function?" he asked, generating fresh laughter from the watching recruits. "Yes, sir. I've maintained it personally for 2 decades. 2 decades? Martinez raised an eyebrow. "How old are you, Rodriguez?" 36, sir." The silence that followed spoke volumes. Most candidates were fresh from basic training, barely old enough to drink legally. Elena had spent 15 years in logistics and supply management, earning her spot through exceptional scores that had caught someone's attention. But looking at the faces around her, she realized her experience might be viewed as a liability, rather than an asset. That evening, while organizing her gear in the barracks, Elena overheard Brett talking to his admirers. $20 says the supply clerk quits by Wednesday," he said with casual cruelty. "She's probably here because someone misread her paperwork. This place is for warriors, not warehouse workers." The nickname spread like wildfire. Supply clerk. Within days, even some instructors were using it. Elena endured every slight in absolute silence, channeling her energy into studying range conditions and preparing for the evaluation that would determine her fate. She had no way of knowing that in just weeks that same silence would be the thin line between life and death for a visiting dignitary, and that the obsolete rifle they all mocked would prove that sometimes old wisdom trumps new technology when everything is on the line. But first, she had to survive being the outsider in a system that had already written her off. When speed meets reality, the qualification range stretched before them like a battlefield engineered for failure. 15 shooting stations, each presenting targets at distances ranging from 200 to 1,000 yards. The mountain wind howled across the range, turning the flags into frantic dancers. Elena felt her familiar calm descend as she analyzed the conditions. This was where she belonged, where noise became music and chaos revealed its hidden patterns. "Candidates, you have 45 seconds per target engagement," Major Thompson announced through speakers that crackled with authority. "Speed and accuracy combined, or you fail at both." Eleanor loaded her bolt-action rifle, feeling the smooth mechanism that responded to her touch like a trusted partner. Around her, other candidates chambered rounds in their semi-automatic platforms, their rate of fire advantage obvious and intimidating. The mathematical reality was stark. They could shoot 3 times faster than she could cycle her bolt. But Elena had always believed that one perfect shot was worth a dozen rushed ones. The whistle shrieked. Brett Kingston was already engaging his 3rd target, while Elena was still settling into her first shot. His rifle barked in rapid succession as he moved through the course with mechanical efficiency. Elena worked with deliberate precision, taking time to read wind patterns, calculate drop, and deliver shots that found their targets with surgical accuracy. Her bullets carved perfect holes through the scoring rings, dead center, shot after shot. But when the final whistle echoed across the range, she was still lining up her final engagement. "Time!" Thompson's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Cease fire immediately!" Elena's last shot was flawless, a bullseye at 900 yards that would have impressed Olympic shooters. But she had completed only 12 of the 15 required engagements. The time limit had defeated her. During scoring, Sergeant Martinez walked the line with the methodical pace of a judge delivering verdicts. When he reached Elena's station, he stopped cold. Her completed shots formed groups tighter than anything else on the range, precision that bordered on the impossible. But rules were carved in stone. "Rodriguez," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Outstanding marksmanship, but failure to complete the course of fire. That's a program elimination." Brett's targets showed adequate hits mixed with several complete misses, and one target he'd forgotten to engage entirely. His time, however, was well within standards. Kingston, passing. Score, excellent time management. It was Elena's first taste of a system that valued looking good over being right. As they walked back to the barracks, Elena heard the whispers begin like poison in the wind. "Told you she couldn't handle real pressure? Maybe they'll send her." Back to counting inventory. "Should have brought a rifle from this century, Grandma." That evening, Elena found official papers on her bunk. Her reassignment orders, effective immediately, she was being transferred to weapons maintenance. No second chance, no appeal process. Just a bureaucratic dismissal typed on government letterhead. Elena sat on her narrow bunk staring at the orders that ended 15 years of dreaming. Perfect marksmanship scores, countless hours of practice. A lifetime of preparation, all erased because she was 5 seconds too slow on an arbitrary timeline. "Hey, don't look so crushed," Brett said, appearing at her bunk with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "At least now you can clean our rifles properly. Try not to damage my scope when you're polishing it. That thing cost more than your truck." The laughter from his crew stung like acid, but Elena folded the orders quietly and placed them in her journal. She'd report to the weapons depot tomorrow as commanded, but something inside her had crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. She might not be fast enough for their tests, but she knew something they hadn't learned yet. Speed was meaningless if you missed the only shot that would ever matter. In the margins of her journal, she wrote a single line that would become her creed: precision over speed, always. The next morning, she reported to Chief Warrant Officer Johnson in the weapons depot. He was a weathered man in his 50s who'd been maintaining military hardware longer than most recruits had been breathing. "So you're the marksman washout," Johnson said without cruelty. "Heard you can shoot straight, just too slow for the young guns?" "Yes, sir." Johnson studied her with eyes that had seen everything the military had to offer. "Well, Rodriguez, maybe you'll learn something useful here. These high-tech rifles they're carrying need constant babying. And between you and me," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "half these kids couldn't hit a barn if it was painted neon and playing loud music." Elena managed her first genuine smile since arriving at Fort Blackstone. It was the first time anyone had suggested she might have value beyond her apparent failures. As she began learning the intricate details of rifle maintenance and ballistic calibration, Elena didn't realize that her new position would give her access to something invaluable: the detailed performance records of every rifle on base, including classified data that would soon become critically important. She was about to discover that sometimes being overlooked is the greatest advantage of all. The maintenance revolution. 3 weeks into her weapons depot assignment, Elena had settled into an invisible routine that made her nearly ghost-like around the base. She arrived before dawn, calibrated and maintained rifles with surgical precision, and endured the daily parade of jokes from marksman candidates who treated her like glorified cleaning staff. "How's our equipment janitor today?" Brett would ask whenever he dropped off his rifle, always with his entourage of admirers trailing behind. "Let's make sure my scope is absolutely perfect. I've got a reputation to protect around here." Elena would nod wordlessly and accept his rifle, often discovering it was poorly maintained and incorrectly zeroed. She'd fix every problem without comment, returning a weapon that performed better than when Brett had first received it. He never noticed the improvements, always crediting his exceptional scores to natural talent and superior equipment, but Elena noticed everything, and she was building a database that would change everything. She maintained meticulous records. In her journal, not just wind patterns and ballistic calculations, but detailed performance analysis of every rifle that passed through the depot. Brett's rifle, she documented, had a subtle trigger mechanism flaw that caused shots to pull left under stress. Another candidate's scope had tracking issues that threw off long-range accuracy. She corrected these problems silently, never mentioning them to the rifle owners. The real revelation came when Chief Johnson showed her the classified performance data from the range computers. "This doesn't leave the depot," Johnson said, pulling up detailed shooting analysis on his secure terminal. "But look at these patterns. Really look." Elena studied the data with growing understanding that felt like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The computer tracked not just hit or miss, but precision consistency, performance degradation under stress, and accuracy patterns that revealed each shooter's true capabilities. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Brett Kingston, the golden boy of the marksman program, had serious accuracy problems that his speed was masking. Under stress simulation, his shot groups opened up by over 60%. Several other top-ranked candidates showed similar patterns. They could shoot fast enough to impress observers, but when precision was truly tested, they faltered dramatically. "Sir," Elena said carefully, "some of these candidates might not be ready for real-world deployment." Johnson nodded grimly. "I've been trying to tell the instructors that for months, but speed sells, Rodriguez. The brass loves fast times and quick kills. They don't want to hear about precision under genuine pressure." That evening, Elena made a decision that would change everything at Fort Blackstone. Using her access to range computers and maintenance records, she began compiling a comprehensive analysis of each candidate's true capabilities. She worked deep into the night, cross-referencing ammunition performance data, rifle condition reports, and shooting statistics that told a story completely different from the official rankings. What she discovered was deeply disturbing. The Academy's obsession with speed was graduating marksmen who couldn't perform when lives actually depended on their skills. Brett and several others were heading for advanced training, despite having significant accuracy deficiencies that would manifest catastrophically in real combat scenarios. Elena documented everything with scientific precision, preparing a report that she planned to submit through proper military channels. But she also knew that challenging the program's fundamental philosophy would likely end her career permanently. The next morning brought an unexpected complication that felt like a trap closing around her. Major Thompson visited the weapons depot personally, something that had never happened in Johnson's memory. "Rodriguez," he said, his tone carrying dangerous undertones, "I need to discuss some unusual computer access in our range systems." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice remained steady as steel. "Sir, I've been maintaining rifles and reviewing performance data as part of my assigned duties. That's not what concerns me." Thompson moved closer, his presence intimidating. "Someone has been accessing classified training records and candidate performance databases. That exceeds your security clearance significantly." Johnson stepped forward protectively. "Major, I authorized Rodriguez to access that data for maintenance and calibration purposes. If there's a problem—" "The problem," Thompson interrupted, sharply, is that someone is compiling unauthorized reports on candidate performance, reports that could be interpreted as undermining this program's integrity. Elena realized her careful documentation had been discovered, but instead of retreating, she made a choice that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. Sir, if you've reviewed my reports, then you understand what I found. Some of these candidates aren't ready for deployment. The performance data proves it conclusively. The silence in the depot was suffocating. Thompson stared at her for what felt like an eternity, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and something that might have been uncertainty. Rodriguez, your support staff who failed marksman training, what makes you think you're qualified to evaluate candidates who succeeded where you couldn't? Because I've been maintaining their rifles for weeks, sir, and I've seen what happens when precision actually matters. It was the first time Elena had directly challenged the system, and she could see fury building in Thompson's expression. But she also detected something else: doubt. Deep down, he suspected she might be right. You're walking on thin ice. Rodriguez, Thompson said finally, I suggest you focus on your assigned duties and stop playing instructor. After he left, Johnson placed a supportive hand on Elena's shoulder. You've got courage. I'll give you that. But be careful. Thompson doesn't like being challenged, especially by someone the program has already rejected. Elena nodded, but her resolve had only strengthened. She'd spent too many years being dismissed and overlooked. If nobody else would advocate for precision and real combat readiness, then she would, regardless of the personal consequences. What she didn't know was that her confrontation with Thompson had been overheard by someone who would soon play a crucial role in everything that followed. Storm clouds gathering. The atmosphere at Fort Blackstone shifted dramatically after Elena's confrontation with Major Thompson. Word spread through the base like wildfire that the weapons depot washout had challenged the marksman program's fundamental methods. Most recruits found it hilarious, the failure critiquing the candidates who'd succeeded where she'd been eliminated. Brett Kingston made sure everyone heard his perspective. Can you believe the audacity? Supply clerk thinks she knows better than trained instructors. Next thing you know, the cafeteria workers will be giving tactical advice. But not everyone was laughing. Some people were paying very close attention. Colonel Amanda Cross, the base commander, had been quietly reviewing Elena's unauthorized reports in her private office. What she discovered kept her awake at night, staring at data that challenged everything she thought she knew about the program she oversaw. Johnson, she said, summoning the chief warrant officer to her office, I need to understand these performance analyses your maintainer compiled. Are these calculations accurate? Johnson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Yes, ma'am. Rodriguez has access to all rifle performance data, and her analysis is mathematically sound. She's identified some significant readiness concerns with candidate preparation. Colonel Cross studied the reports spread across her desk like evidence in a court case. As Dutch. According to this data, several of our highest-ranked candidates show serious accuracy degradation under authentic stress conditions. Kingston's precision drops by 55% in simulated combat scenarios. That's correct, ma'am. Then why are they still in the program? Johnson hesitated, understanding he was entering dangerous territory. Ma'am, that's above my authority level, but Rodriguez has been attempting to raise these concerns through proper channels. That afternoon, Colonel Cross made a decision that would have consequences none of them could predict. She requested to observe Elena's work in the weapons depot personally. When she arrived unannounced, she found Elena meticulously calibrating a rifle scope, making microscopic adjustments with the precision of a master craftsman. Rodriguez, Cross said, watching her work with professional interest, show me exactly what you mean about precision under pressure. Elena looked up, surprised to see the base commander in her workspace. Ma'am? Your reports suggest our training methods are fundamentally flawed. I want to understand your reasoning. For the next 2 hours, Elena walked Colonel Cross through her discoveries. She demonstrated how speed-focused training created muscle memory that prioritized rapid engagement over careful shot placement. She showed evidence of rifle damage from hasty manipulation, indicating poor fundamentals under time pressure. The core problem, ma'am, Elena explained, is that we're training marksmen to perform well on a controlled range with predictable conditions and artificial time limits, but real-world shots don't come with countdown timers or ideal weather. Cross nodded thoughtfully. You're saying we're optimizing for the test, not the mission. Exactly, ma'am. Colonel Cross made a decision that would change everything at Fort Blackstone. I want you to document specific examples with supporting data. Names, performance statistics, projected real-world impact analysis. Can you compile that? Yes, ma'am, but what? Eleanor took a steadying breath. Major Thompson has made it clear that my input isn't welcome. If I continue this analysis, it could be viewed as insubordination. Cross's expression hardened with command authority. Rodriguez, my responsibility is ensuring this base produces combat-ready personnel. If our methods are flawed, I need to know immediately. Continue your analysis. You report directly to me now. The change was immediate and dramatic. Within hours, Elena found herself with expanded access to training records, computer systems, and classified performance databases. Major Thompson was furious but couldn't openly oppose a direct order from the base commander. Brett Kingston's response was predictably crude. Look who's got powerful friends now, he sneered when he saw Elena at a command briefing. Still doesn't make you marksman material, depot worker. But Elena was no longer just maintaining rifles. She was analyzing every aspect of the training program, identifying weaknesses that could prove fatal in actual combat. Her breakthrough came when she discovered something in the historical archives that changed everything. Buried in classified records was performance data from previous graduating classes, including combat deployment outcomes from graduates who'd gone on to real missions. The statistics were shocking and undeniable. Several top performers from Fort Blackstone had failed. Critical shots in actual combat situations. Some had been wounded or killed because their focus on speed over precision had failed them when everything depended on their skills. Elena compiled this data into a comprehensive report titled Velocity vs. Precision, a Combat Readiness Analysis. It was detailed, devastating, and impossible to ignore. But as she prepared to submit her findings, she received an unexpected visitor. A stern-faced captain from base security appeared at the depot door with an expression that suggested trouble. Rodriguez, I need you to come with me immediately. Colonel Cross wants to see you right now. As Elena walked across the base, she noticed unusual activity. There were more vehicles than normal in the parking areas, and she could see additional security personnel at strategic positions around key buildings. Something significant was about to happen at Fort Blackstone, and Elena's timing couldn't have been more critical or more dangerous. The next few days would test everything she'd learned about precision, patience, and the difference between looking impressive on paper and performing when lives hung in the balance. The ultimate test. General Victoria Hayes arrived at Fort Blackstone on a Tuesday morning with a convoy that included Pentagon officials, Congressional Oversight Committee members, and a media team documenting the military's Revolutionary Speed Training Initiative. The visit was designed to showcase the Academy's innovative methods and demonstrate how they were producing elite marksmen in record time. Elena watched from the weapons depot window as the impressive convoy rolled through the main gate. She'd spent the previous week finalizing her combat readiness analysis, but Colonel Cross had been mysteriously unavailable for meetings. Now she understood why. The base had been preparing for this high-profile inspection. All personnel not directly involved in the demonstration will remain at assigned duty stations, announced the base-wide communication system. Elena was definitely not involved in the demonstration. She was about to witness a carefully orchestrated performance that would hide the truth she'd discovered. The morning unfolded like a precision military operation designed for maximum impact. General Hayes observed live-fire exercises where Brett Kingston and other top candidates delivered an impressive display of rapid target engagement. Their times were exceptional, their confidence obvious to all observers. Remarkable improvement. In training efficiency, Elena heard the general comment as the group passed near the depot, we're producing combat-ready marksmen in half the traditional time frame. What the general couldn't see were the details Elena had documented, the missed shots edited out of the demonstration, the carefully controlled weather conditions that minimized wind challenges, the predetermined target distances that played. To each candidate's documented strengths, it was a show designed to impress, not to reveal truth. Around midday, Brett approached the depot with his usual arrogance amplified by the morning's success. "Hey, depot worker," he called out, "did you see that shooting demonstration? That's what real marksmen look like. Maybe you learned something useful?" Elena was maintaining his rifle at the time, having discovered a feeding mechanism issue that would cause dangerous jams under rapid-fire conditions. She'd already corrected the problem, as she always did without fanfare. "Your rifle's ready," she said simply, returning the weapon to him. Brett barely glanced at the rifle, his attention focused on the continuing demonstrations. "Better be perfect. I've got more exhibitions this afternoon." That afternoon brought the stress test, a simulated combat scenario that would change everything. The exercise was designed to push candidates to their limits while dealing with multiple environmental challenges under intense time pressure. Elena observed from the maintenance bay, using her spotting scope to monitor details the officials couldn't see from their elevated viewing platform. Through her precision optics, Elena witnessed something the VIP observers missed completely. Under the added pressure and environmental complications, the candidate's accuracy degraded significantly. Brett, in particular, was struggling visibly. His shots were spreading wider with each engagement, and she could see him rushing his breathing between targets. Then disaster struck without warning. One of the smoke generation systems malfunctioned catastrophically, creating a much thicker cloud than the exercise had planned. The wind shifted unexpectedly, carrying dense smoke across the range in patterns that hadn't been anticipated. Suddenly, the controlled demonstration became genuinely challenging and unpredictable. Brett's rifle jammed, exactly the feeding issue. Elena had just repaired should have prevented this, but his rapid manipulation under stress had triggered a different mechanical failure. She could see him struggling desperately with the weapon, precious seconds evaporating. Through her spotting scope, Elena spotted something that made her blood freeze in her veins, in the confusion created by the unexpected smoke and changing conditions. One of the automated target systems had malfunctioned severely. A pop-up target that should have appeared at 400 yards had instead activated at 700 yards, but it wasn't displaying the bright orange training marker that identified it as an exercise prop. It looked exactly like a genuine threat requiring immediate engagement. Elena grabbed her radio and attempted to contact range control. Static interference. The communication systems were being deliberately jammed as part of the exercise's realism enhancement. She tried the emergency frequency. Nothing but electronic noise. Through her scope, she watched Brett acquire the distant target, completely unaware of the catastrophic mistake about to unfold. From his position and angle, he couldn't see what Elena could observe clearly. There was a maintenance technician working beyond the malfunctioned target, completely outside the official range boundaries and totally unaware of the unfolding situation. Brett steadied his rifle, his finger beginning to apply pressure to the trigger. At this distance, with his documented accuracy problems under stress conditions, there was a significant probability of a miss that could prove fatal to the innocent worker. Elena had perhaps 2 seconds to prevent a tragedy. She'd spent months being dismissed, mocked, and relegated to support duties. Everyone had told her she wasn't fast enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't marksman material. But in this critical moment, all of that background noise faded into absolute silence. Elena seized her own rifle, the museum piece everyone had ridiculed, and moved to the window with fluid precision that came from decades of practice. She had one opportunity to prevent a catastrophe, and it required exactly the kind of shot that speed-focused training could never prepare someone for, a precision shot under ultimate pressure, where being fast meant nothing and being absolutely right meant everything. The shot that changed everything, time crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity that felt like stepping outside normal reality. Elena's bolt-action rifle came up smooth and natural, the familiar weight settling into her shoulder like it had been designed specifically for her body. Through her scope, she could see Brett's finger tightening incrementally on his trigger. The maintenance worker checking equipment 50 yards behind the malfunctioned target, completely oblivious to the developing tragedy. No time for radio communications, no time for shouted warnings, Just one shot to prevent a disaster that would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. Elena's breathing slowed to match her heartbeat, the world narrowing to mathematical precision. Wind flags at 500 and 700 yards showed a slight crosswind from the left, approximately 4 mph, steady and predictable. Distance to Brett's position, 380 yards. Angle, slightly downhill, requiring compensation. Her journal calculations flashed through her mind like downloaded software, years of obsessive study becoming instinctive knowledge. She aimed not at Brett himself, but at his rifle's receiver mechanism. One precise shot to disable his weapon without causing injury. It was a nearly impossible target for most shooters, hitting a 6-inch area at nearly 400 yards while the target was in motion. But Elena had been making impossible shots her entire adult life. The trigger broke cleanly, like a piece of crystal snapping. The crack of her rifle echoed across the demonstration range just as Brett's weapon sparked and jerked violently in his hands. His shot went wildly off target, kicking up dirt 30 yards from the malfunctioned target. Brett stumbled backward in shock and confusion, staring at his suddenly disabled rifle as if it had betrayed him personally. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. General Hayes and her entire entourage turned toward the weapons depot, trying to understand what had just occurred. Smoke was still drifting across the range, but the exercise had clearly stopped. Completely. "What the hell was that?" Major Thompson barked into his radio. "Who fired an unauthorized shot during a live demonstration?" Elena set her rifle down with deliberate care and walked out of the depot building. Every eye on the base was now focused on her as she crossed the range toward the demonstration area, her boots crunching steadily on gravel, each step measured and unhurried. She looked like someone walking to her own court-martial. "Ma'am," she said, addressing General Hayes directly with military precision, "there was a critical safety hazard. The target system malfunctioned, and there was a civilian in the potential impact zone." Brett was examining his rifle with growing bewilderment, trying to understand why it had suddenly stopped functioning. The bullet had struck the receiver, with surgical precision, disabling the firing mechanism completely without causing an explosion or injury. It was the kind of accuracy that bordered on supernatural skill. Colonel Cross appeared at Elena's side, having witnessed everything from the command observation post. "General Hayes, this is Specialist Rodriguez, our senior weapons maintainer." The general studied Elena with entirely new interest and growing respect. "That was your shot, Specialist?" "Yes, ma'am. I had clear line of sight to observe the malfunction and assess the safety threat," an aide whispered urgently in the general's ear, and she nodded with understanding. "I want to examine this target system malfunction immediately, and I want a complete debrief on exactly what happened here." As the investigation unfolded over the next hour, the truth became undeniably clear. The target system had indeed malfunctioned, catastrophically, creating exactly the kind of scenario that kills innocent people in real combat situations. Brett's shot, if it had been fired, would have had a high probability of missing the intended target and potentially striking the maintenance worker who was completely unaware of the danger. But the most shocking revelation came when they examined Brett's disabled rifle. Elena's shot had struck with absolute surgical precision, disabling the weapon completely while leaving the shooter completely unharmed. The margin for error had been virtually non-existent, requiring the kind of skill that most people couldn't achieve under perfect conditions, let alone under extreme pressure. "Specialist Rodriguez," General Hayes said, her voice carrying new authority and respect, "I need to understand something crucial. How did you make that shot?" Elena pulled out her worn journal, opening it to pages covered with wind calculations and ballistic data that represented years of obsessive study. "Ma'am, I've been tracking range conditions and performance data for months. I understood the wind patterns, the distance variables, and my rifle's capabilities under these specific conditions. But the target, hitting a moving rifle at that distance with that precision. It wasn't about speed, ma'am. It was about precision under ultimate pressure." The words hung in the air like an indictment of everything they'd been teaching. Everyone present understood the implication immediately. The washout, the depot worker, the woman they'd all dismissed as inadequate, had just demonstrated exactly the kind of skill the program claimed to be developing in their graduates. "Brett," finally found his voice, but it emerged as barely more than a whisper. "How did you... that shot was impossible for anyone." Elena looked at him with something that might have been compassion. It was the only shot that mattered. General Hayes was quiet for a long moment, studying Elena with the calculating gaze of someone completely reassessing everything she thought she understood. When she finally spoke, her voice carried unmistakable command authority. "Colonel Cross, I want a complete review of this entire training program, and I want Specialist Rodriguez directly involved in that comprehensive review." As the group dispersed, Elena found herself standing alone on the range where her dreams had supposedly died months earlier. But everything had fundamentally changed. The woman they'd written off as too slow, too old, too precise, had just demonstrated that sometimes being absolutely right was infinitely more important than being impressively fast. The real reckoning was just beginning, and it would transform everything. Revolution. The investigation that followed lasted 5 intense days and turned Fort Blackstone completely upside down. General Hayes had ordered a comprehensive audit of the entire training program, and Elena found herself at the center of a storm that would fundamentally reshape military marksman training across all branches. In the base conference room, Elena's combat readiness analysis was finally receiving the serious attention it deserved. Colonel Cross had provided it to the investigation team, and the documented data was absolutely damning. Charts and graphs covered every wall, showing the dangerous gap between range performance and real combat effectiveness. "These statistics are deeply troubling," General Hayes said, studying the comprehensive analysis. "Specialist Rodriguez, walk me through your complete findings." Elena stood at the front of the room facing the same officials who had been celebrating the program's speed-focused methods just days earlier. Major Thompson sat in the back corner, his expression carefully controlled but his tension obvious to anyone who knew how to read body language. "Ma'am, the fundamental issue is that we're training for artificial conditions that don't exist in real combat," Elena began, her voice steady and confident. "Range performance under arbitrary time limits doesn't translate to combat effectiveness when actual lives are at stake." She clicked through her presentation methodically, showing historical data from previous graduating classes. These charts demonstrate a clear correlation between speed-focused training and combat mission failures. Graduates who excelled in timed exercises struggled significantly when facing real-world scenarios that required precision under genuine life-or-death pressure. Brett Kingston, sitting in the front row with his arm in a precautionary sling, raised his hand tentatively. "But ma'am, speed is absolutely essential in combat situations. Hesitation gets people killed regularly." Elena nodded with understanding. "You're absolutely right about hesitation, Brett, but rushing shots also gets people killed, often the wrong people entirely. Combat situations require the tactical judgment to understand when speed matters, and when precision is literally everything." She turned to the next slide, showing her detailed analysis of the demonstration incident. The target malfunction created exactly the kind of scenario marksmen face in actual deployment: unexpected conditions, unclear target identification, and innocent lives at immediate risk. The training program's emphasis on rapid engagement nearly caused a preventable tragedy. General Hayes leaned forward with intense interest. "What specifically are you recommending?" "A fundamental philosophical shift in training methodology, ma'am. We need to teach adaptive precision, the ability to slow down and take the careful shot when the situation absolutely demands it, while maintaining the capability for rapid engagement when tactically appropriate." Major Thompson finally spoke. Up, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "General, with all due respect, Specialist Rodriguez failed our qualification standards completely. Her recommendations are based entirely on her inability to meet established program requirements." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. It was the moment Elena had been dreading, her documented failure being used to discredit everything she'd discovered and proven. But General Hayes's response surprised everyone in the room. "Major Thompson, 5 days ago I watched Specialist Rodriguez, make an impossible precision shot under extreme pressure to prevent a potential fatality during your demonstration. That suggests your qualification standards might be measuring completely the wrong capabilities. She stood and addressed the entire room with unmistakable authority. I'm implementing immediate changes to this program, effective today. First, all current candidates will undergo additional comprehensive evaluation, focusing on precision under authentic stress rather than speed under artificial time constraints. Brett shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the general continued. Second, the training curriculum will be completely redesigned to emphasize adaptive marksmanship, understanding when to shoot fast and when to shoot with absolute precision. Third, Specialist Rodriguez will be immediately reinstated as a marksman candidate and will directly assist in developing the new training protocols. The announcement hit the room like a thunderbolt. Elena felt her knees weaken slightly, but she maintained her military composure. Ma'am, I appreciate the confidence, but nothing, Specialist. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and precision we need our marksmen to possess consistently. The question is, are you willing to help us completely rebuild this program? Elena looked around the room at faces staring back at her, with expressions ranging from respect to fear. Some showed admiration she'd never experienced before. Others, including Brett, showed something closer to fear, the realization that their assumptions about skill and qualification were being fundamentally challenged. Yes, ma'am, I'm willing. Major Thompson requested a private conference with General Hayes after the meeting. Elena couldn't hear the conversation, but she could observe Thompson's animated gestures and the general's increasingly stern expression. When they finished, Thompson approached Elena directly. Rodriguez, he said, his voice carefully controlled, it appears I owe you an apology. Your methods, your approach, I may have been too hasty in my judgment. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but coming from Thompson, it represented a significant shift. Brett approached her as she was organizing her presentation materials, his usual swagger completely gone. That shot you made, he said quietly. I've been thinking about it constantly. I couldn't have made that shot. Not under that pressure, not with that precision required. Elena looked at him, seeing perhaps the first crack in his arrogant facade. You could learn to, she said simply, if you're willing to slow down long enough to understand what really matters. That evening, alone in the weapons depot, Elena cleaned her rifle one more time. Tomorrow she would return to the range, not as support staff, but as both student and instructor in a program she was helping to reshape. The woman they'd called too slow, too old, too precise, was about to show them that sometimes the very qualities that seem like weaknesses are actually the greatest strengths of all. Full circle 6 months later, Elena Rodriguez stood at the same firing line where her dreams had seemingly ended, but everything was fundamentally different now. The range flags flew the same patterns, the Montana wind still cut through her jacket, but the Fort Blackstone Marksman Academy had been completely transformed. Shooters, you have as much time as you need for each engagement, came the announcement over the loudspeaker. Your evaluation will be based on precision, tactical decision-making, and adaptive judgment, not speed. Elena smiled as she watched. The new class of candidates approached their stations. Among them was Brett Kingston, who had requested to repeat the program under the new curriculum. His cocky swagger had been replaced by focused determination, and his equipment now included a notebook similar to Elena's, filled with wind data, ballistic calculations, and tactical observations. Instructor Rodriguez, Brett said as he passed. Her position, thank you for the ballistic analysis on today's conditions. You're welcome, Kingston. Remember, read the wind, trust your training, and take the shot that counts. The transformation hadn't been easy or universally welcomed. Some old-school instructors had resisted the changes, and several candidates had washed out when faced with standards that valued judgment over speed. But the results spoke for themselves. Recent graduates were performing significantly better in advanced training and real combat deployments. Colonel Cross approached Elena's observation post. How are they progressing, instructor? Better every day, ma'am. They're learning to think strategically instead of just react automatically. The new program, officially renamed the Adaptive precision marksman course had become a model for military training programs worldwide. Elena's combat readiness analysis had been published in defense journals, and her methods were being studied at the Pentagon and military academies globally. But for Elena, the real victory was much simpler. She watched a young female candidate named Jessica Torres methodically work through a complex shooting problem. The candidate took her time, calculated wind drift carefully, and delivered a perfect shot at 850 yards. 6 months ago, she would have been failed for taking too long. Today, she was praised for her precision and tactical thinking. Time doesn't matter if you miss the only shot that counts, Elena had told her students that morning. It had become the unofficial motto of the new program. As the exercise concluded, Elena noticed something that made her heart swell with quiet pride. On the barracks wall, where "Speed Kills First" had once been painted in chrome letters, there was now a new motto: right shot, right time, every time. Brett Kingston approached her after securing his rifle. His notebook was as thick as Elena's now, filled with the same meticulous observations she'd been making for years. "Instructor Rodriguez," he said, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my career, maybe my life." Elena nodded with understanding. "You owe me nothing, Brett. You earned your place here by being willing to learn and change. That takes more courage than most people realize." General Hayes had returned to Fort Blackston that week for a comprehensive follow-up inspection. The transformation she witnessed exceeded all expectations. The new graduates weren't just better shooters, they were better soldiers, capable of making life-and-death decisions under pressure with the kind of judgment that couldn't be rushed or artificially created. "Specialist Rodriguez," the general said during the closing ceremony, "your work here has implications far beyond marksman training. You've demonstrated that sometimes our biggest failures reveal our most important truths." Elena stood at attention, but inside she felt the quiet satisfaction of complete vindication. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the deep, lasting satisfaction of knowing she'd been right when it mattered most. That evening, as the sun set behind the Montana peaks, Elena found herself alone on the range one final time. She'd been offered a promotion and transfer to the Pentagon to help implement the new training standards across all military branches. Tomorrow she would leave Fort Blackstone for the last time. She pulled out her notebook, the same worn, leather-bound book that had been mocked and dismissed months earlier. Its pages were now filled with the foundation of a revolutionary approach to military training. On the final page she wrote a single entry: "Sometimes the slowest person in the room is the only one who sees what really matters. Speed is a tool, precision is a principle, and when lives hang in the balance, principles always win." A soft footstep behind her announced someone's approach. Chief Johnson walked up carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing her the package. Inside was a brass nameplate: Chief Instructor Elena Rodriguez, Adaptive Precision Training Division. "You changed everything here, Rodriguez. Not just the program, but the people. That's worth remembering." As Elena walked back toward the barracks for the last time, she passed the memorial wall where the names of fallen marksmen were engraved in black granite. She paused, thinking of all the lives that might be saved by soldiers trained to value precision over speed, judgment over reaction. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Maria Santos, recent graduate of your program. Wanted you to know I made a critical shot in Syria last week. Took my time, read the wind, and saved 4 civilians. Thank you for teaching me that the right shot is always worth waiting for." Elena smiled and put the phone away. She'd been called a clerical error in boots, a ghost who'd wandered out of logistics, a depot worker with delusions. They'd all been wrong about what those labels meant. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. Sometimes the one who moves too slowly is the only one moving in the right direction, and sometimes, just sometimes, being different isn't a weakness. It's the very strength the world has been waiting for. As she reached the barracks, Elena turned for one last look at the range where her journey had begun. In the fading light, she could see tomorrow's candidates setting up their equipment, preparing for a program that would teach them something. The old school never could. That precision isn't about being perfect under artificial conditions. It's about being right when everything depends on it. The woman they'd tried to wash out had ended up washing out an entire system of thinking. And in its place, she'd built something better, a program that honored both speed and precision, but never confused one for the other. Elena Rodriguez walked into the barracks carrying her worn rifle case and her thick notebook, no longer the misfit in boots, but the architect of a revolution. She'd proven that sometimes the most important victories don't announce themselves with fanfare. They whisper their truth in the silence between heartbeats, in the space between breathing in and letting go, in that perfect moment when everything aligns and the only shot that matters finds its mark. The range would remember her long after she was gone. But more importantly, every marksman trained in her methods would carry a piece of her wisdom forward. That rushing to the finish line means nothing if you're running in the wrong direction, and that the courage to slow down in a fast world might just be the bravest thing of all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.